Three little girls went to Girl Scout camp in the summer of 1977 and were killed less than 24 hours later. Lori Farmer was only 8 years old. She was the youngest of the girls. She knew that summer that she wanted to go to summer camp, but she couldn't choose between going to the YMCA camp or the Girl Scout camp, and it was actually her mother that urged her that she should go to the Girl Scout camp. Michelle Gousset was 9 years old. She had gone to the same Girl Scout camp the previous summer and was really excited about going to camp again this year. And Doris Milner, who went by Denise, was 10 years old. This would be her first time ever going to summer camp, and she was super anxious about it. She actually told her mother right before camp that she did not want to go anymore, but her mother convinced her that she should go. What's super eerie is that the day that Denise left for camp, her 5-year-old sister asked her mom out of the blue about death and what happened to people when they die. Her mom tried to explain it, to her 5-year-old daughter, and then her daughter just says, "Mama, tomorrow everybody is going to die." And the very next night, Lori, Michelle, and her sister Denise were all killed. On June 12th, 1977, over 130 girls and their camp counselors all showed up to summer camp. They're all nervous and excited. All girls were separated into 10 units, 10 campsites, and then they had 8 or so tents that the girls would share. Each unit looked something like this. So you see there's 7 tents which the girls would share, and then this tent right here was the counselor's tent. And then this tent, tent 7, was the tent that Lori, Michelle, and Denise were sharing. As you can see, it's the farthest one from any of the counselors, and this building right here completely obstructed the view from the counselors to tent 7. This is so dangerous and upsetting and frustrating. If you take over 100 little girls into the middle of the woods, you should be able to see them at all times, or at least see their tents. The tents should have 100% been closer to the counselors. And I know you could argue that hindsight is 20/20 and they did not know that something awful was going to happen. But what if I told you that the camp was actually warned that 3 little girls would be killed at this camp? Before camp started, all the counselors were brought to the campsite for some on-site training, and a lot of really weird things started happening. A lot of the counselors started realizing that food was going missing and no one was fessing up that they're the ones that took the food. Also, their belongings, their bags, looked like someone had gone through them. Some of their belongings were just missing completely, and then they found something straight out of a horror movie. 3 notebook pages were found at camp that just had the word "kill" written over and over again all over the pages, and then they also found a page that said, "We are on a mission to kill 3 girls in tent 1. I mean, what the hell, right? And then the camp just completely dismissed this as a prank, and none of the parents that were sending their little baby girls to this camp in just a few weeks were made aware of this. On the first night of camp, there was a terrible thunderstorm. Michelle, Lori, and Denise were all sharing tent 7. There was also a 4th girl that was meant to be in their tent, but last minute she was switched to another tent, a decision that ultimately ended up saving her life. In the middle of the night, between the hours of 1 and 3 a.m., multiple campers and camp counselors started to hear and see some really creepy, eerie things. Multiple campers and camp counselors heard the most bizarre noise. It was like a moaning, groaning noise. It kind of sounded like a human, but it also kind of sounded like an animal. One counselor, who was only 15 that heard the noise, kind of shined her flashlight out of the tent, but when the noises stopped, she just went back to bed. Some campers said that they saw in the middle of the woods, off of their campsite, 3 lights that looked like they were from flashlights, and some campers were even woken up from flashlights being shined into their tents. And then around 3 a.m., some campers woke up to the sounds of screaming and someone calling out for their mama before the sounds all stopped completely. In the morning, one of the counselors was walking to the showers when she noticed a sleeping bag that was left outside kind of near the bushes. So when she got closer to the sleeping bag, she noticed that the body of 10-year-old Denise was stuffed inside. The counselor immediately runs to alert the other counselors and the owners of the camp. All the other little girls were moved to a different area and they distracted them with games while they did a head count to see who else was missing, if anyone else was missing, while police were brought to the area. And that's when they found the bodies of 8-year-old Lori and 9-year-old Michelle in the woods about 150 yards away from their tent. They were also in their sleeping bags. All girls were obviously gone. They were not wearing anything. They had been badly beaten, and there were signs that all of them had been essayed. I don't feel comfortable going into any more detail about how their bodies were found, but guys, it was absolutely horrific. Near Lori and Michelle's body were also duct tape, a flashlight, and nylon rope, and then also a pair of eyeglasses that had been stolen from another tent. Their tent was absolutely covered in blood, and a man's footprint size 9.5 was found in the tent. This is absolutely terrible, but the camp called all 130 families and were like, hey, something terrible happened. You need to come pick up your kid, but they did not tell them on the phone if their kid was okay or not. Just imagine everybody's anxiety, and then Lori, Michelle, and Denise's families are all just standing there while all these other little girls are running up to their families and leaving with their families, just realizing that they will not be leaving with their child. 10 days into the investigation, it was announced that they had a prime suspect, a man named Gene Leroy Hart. He grew up only about a mile away from the camp, so he's familiar with the area. Also, he was supposed to be in prison for a 300-something year sentence, but had escaped prison 4 years earlier and was still at large. Gene was in prison for the kidnap and SA of 2 pregnant women. He also used the same duct tape and nylon rope in that crime that was found at the scene with Lori and Michelle's bodies. Also, the pregnant women said that while Gene was SAing them, that he made the most bizarre animal-like moaning and groaning, and if you remember, the counselors and campers said that they heard the exact same noises that night. Also, if you remember that a pair of eyeglasses had been stolen from another tent and then were left with Michelle and Lori's bodies, well, both of those pregnant women said that they wore eyeglasses, and Gene was super weird about it and wanted to try them on. They brought police dogs to the area, and those dogs led them to a cave that was only a couple miles away from the camp and only 100 feet away from where Gene grew up. It was clear that someone had been living in this cave, and in the cave they also found more items that had been stolen from camp and from the campers, so it's clear that whoever's been hiding out in this cave was responsible for this crime. In the cave, they also found 2 photos of different women, and they were able to confirm that Gene, when he was in prison, stole these photos from another prisoner. So this absolutely links him, right? 10 months later, they found Gene after a massive manhunt and arrested him. When they found him, he was also wearing women's glasses, so this man's weird with glasses. They also found him with multiple items that had been stolen from camp. When Gene went to trial, believe it or not, this man had so many supporters that believed in his innocence. There was DNA that was found on all the girls, and remember, this is like the late 70s. DNA testing was not the same, but it could be determined that this DNA belonged to a non-white male with type O blood, and Gene was Native American man with type O blood. And it was concluded that this DNA could only belong to 0.002% of the population. But the jury, they're not convinced. If you remember, there was a 9.5 male's footprint in the tent, while Gene was a size 11. Also, there was a fingerprint that was found on the flashlight with Lori and Michelle's body. It did not belong to Gene. So after only deliberating for 5 minutes, the jury came back with not guilty. Lori, Michelle, and Denise's families are shocked and devastated, and then it only gets worse because all of Gene's supporters start loudly cheering for him. Could you imagine cheering in a trial for 3 little girls that have been killed? You're disgusting. Gene was sent back to prison to serve out his 300-something year prison sentence, but only 2 months later, after being found not guilty, he passed away in prison from a heart attack at the age of 35. His funeral was attended by over 1,300 people and is actually the largest funeral in that county's history. Investigators 100% believed that Gene was responsible, so they didn't really investigate further after this, and that's where this case stood for over 40 years until 2022, so not that long ago. With new DNA testing, it was confirmed that that DNA did 100% in fact belong to Gene. But since Gene was already dead, there wasn't really anything they could do at that point, but I do hope it brought some kind of peace to Lori, Michelle, and Denise's family. I've always believed, even before 2022, when it was confirmed that Gene was guilty all along. I mean, there was no doubt in my mind, but I've also always believed that this crime was committed by more than one person. I would find it really hard that he would be able to control 3 little girls. I mean, I know it's probably possible, but also if you remember, multiple witnesses saw 3 flashlights in the woods that night. Also paired that with the fact that Gene's footprint and fingerprint were not the ones found at the scene, I 100% believe that at least 2 other people got away with this. I'm really interested to get your guys' take on that. I mean, with the evidence, I'm sure a lot of you guys will agree with me. It's really sad that, you know, all of these people got away with it. I mean, I know Gene didn't live much longer, but, you know, he lived thinking he got away with this and no one would ever know that he did it, and that really disgusts me a lot. Please let me know all your guys' thoughts and opinions in the comments. While you're there, let me know what case you want me to cover next, and I love you guys so much, and I will see you tomorrow.